very quickly go through the main way that we do that, and then we're going to talk about some other ways that we do that. Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Cool. So the main way we do that is by looking out for one another, right? Buddy system. Buddy system is good for really your whole life. Like if you're at a music festival or whatever, that's probably helpful. But it's especially important when you are at a protest. Police would really, really love to come up with a random excuse to follow you to your car and take you home with them. And that's not where you want to be. So keep with your buddy. And that is sort of like just the atom of the molecule of holding together one another. That was a weird analogy. If it's not clear, I didn't prepare a ton to say today, so we're just going to wing it. I hope everybody's comfortable with that. Okay, so the main way that we keep one another safe in the long term, in the medium term, in the short term, in the very instant we're currently in, is we do not talk to fucking cops.
That's right.
We have a couple of strategies that are helpful to remember that we've been chanting periodically throughout our time here, which has been, I think, 140 days? Is that right? 3 or 8 years? I think it's actually day 18 today, which I think everybody should give themselves a round of applause for that. You may remember that the state brought the boot down pretty hard on day 2, and it didn't work, did it?
Nope.
So, what is the first thing that you should say if a police officer tries to talk to you?
Am I being detained?
Oh, you're all so good at this. Am I being detained?
Am I being detained?
Am I being detained?
Am I being detained?
And then if they say no and you aren't being detained, you go. And then you're done. And you don't have to talk to the cops. If the conversation goes any further than that, what do you say?
I don't talk to cops.
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 I recommend this as a daily affirmation. Yourself in the mirror needs to hear it just as much as the pigs do. Oh, I also learned today that pigs, not only did it come from the Black Panthers deciding that cops needed to have like a meaner epithet, but it actually specifically came from Malcolm X keeping it halal. So let's go. Keep it a halal space. No pigs welcome. If there is further conversation with this police officer after you have told him that you will not be giving him any information, what is number 3?
I do not consent to a search.
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 Unfortunately, this is not a magical spell that prevents the police from searching your belongings, but it can be helpful later during litigation, if that ever comes to that. And then, the very last thing that you say to a police officer before doing the most important part is number 4. What's that?
Speak to my attorney.
I want to speak to my lawyer.
Speak to my lawyer.
I want to speak to my lawyer.
I want to speak to my lawyer.
And then what do?
Shut up.
That's right, you shut the fuck up. Every attorney in the whole world, even the really bad ones, of whom there are many, will tell you to shut the fuck up. It's your best form of defense. Okay, so try to remember those 4 things. We have a couple other practices here at camp that I recommend also at every protest. We are very, very lucky to have our comrades at Bread and Roses Legal Center and the Protest Defense Committee. Yeah, absolutely. We have their legal line, which is a phone number that you call if and when you are arrested. It should be written on your arm basically anytime you're out in the public, honestly. Feel free to write it every day, but especially when you're coming to a protest. The number is 303
303
570
570
9362.
9362.
Most of the time we're here, marshals, who are the people in yellow vests, which I'm going to put on after this, will have a Sharpie that you can use. But we don't have special Sharpies, or vests for that matter. You can buy them at Home Depot, and you can buy Sharpies everywhere. You can just write it on your own arm. I highly recommend it. One of the other practices that we use, that we talk about a lot here, is police liaisons. This is especially important if they were ever come to try to sweep or raid our camp. What a police liaison does is break the first 4 rules we just learned, but very, very, very carefully. And so it takes a lot of training and a lot of discipline and a lot of experience to be able to do. So ideally, at any given action, you have a single point of contact who is identified as the police liaison. If Z is here, that's Z. Z doesn't appear to sleep, so it's very frequently Z. If Z is not here, it's me. And I could use the experience, frankly, so I'm hoping Z takes a nap at some point. The basic goal of a police liaison is to give 0 information to the police. So if you see someone talking to the police in this sort of police liaison capacity, don't be scared. They're not breaking ranks, they're not fucking us over, they're not betraying us, they're being very, very, very careful. The second thing that they do is try to delay the police as much as possible. There is almost no, I'm going to go ahead and say there is absolutely no scenario where the police moving quickly is good for us. Ideally, they don't move at all. Ideally, they stay in their fucking pig pens. Ideally, they don't exist anymore in the future. But until that time, we try to keep them as slow as possible, right? So trust your police liaisons. If you have questions, talk to people you trust. Keep your people you trust safe and close to you. And feel free to always bring concerns to marshals if such a thing is necessary and helpful. So I also have a little time here, and I want to talk about state repression in the more abstract ways, right? Everyone has seen a couple of different times with this assortment of people what the boot of the state on the neck of the people looks like, right? It's a bunch of cops. They come out in riot gear. They've got all their fancy weapons and their toys. They whisper into their little microphones. They have a commanding officer. There's a whole pyramid structure. And then what they do is step on people on purpose, right? And we've seen that right here on this lawn. Shade. Unfortunately for us, that's not even the only horrible thing that they do. They also attempt to surveil and disrupt our movements. I always try to think that basically police, we hear the word infiltration a lot. The kind of infiltration I'm going to talk about here today is like literally paid police infiltrators.
That's right.
Which doesn't happen as often as it is said to have happened. So it's important to be careful to avoid ringing that alarm bell unless you really know what's going on, right? We don't want to be cop jacketing our comrades. We don't want to be getting people ostracized from camp because people like decided they were a cop because they like broke up with them or something, right? So police infiltrators generally have a couple of goals. Number one, they're always looking for information. We don't talk to cops when they're in uniform. We also should not talk to cops when they are on the top of that parking garage with a directional microphone, hiding in camp, pretending to just be having a meal, sitting in one of the tents that we can't see, right? So all of that means be careful about what you say and who you say it to. If you're having a really sensitive conversation, maybe take a walk. Maybe whisper, you know? So we want to make sure that they don't get the information that they're looking for. And then the other two things that police are doing are generally kind of at odds. On the one hand, some police want to take a situation that is as planned and as people have consented to and organized to do and escalate it really, really fast in a dumb, non-strategic way. So the classic example is there's a protest, there's a march, it's got a target, it's got a message, there are maybe like babies in strollers and families and people with disabilities and folks are kind of accounted for, and then somebody decides that this is the right moment to go break a bunch of windows. In my opinion, that's rarely strategic, and it very often gives the police an excuse to come in and crack a bunch of skulls, right? If police are going to come in and crack a bunch of skulls, we want people to be prepared for that. So sometimes you will see people sort of intentionally escalate situations. More often, what you'll see is suppression. So somebody might come to your meeting and say, like, did we go through all the appropriate democratic processes here? We should have probably another committee vote on this. Maybe this seems too aggressive a strategy. That kind of just delay tactics, those can also be movement suppression, right? And so all the time, we're kind of trying to stay in between those two boundaries of escalating too much and not escalating enough. And the police would really like us to get outside of that tube. I don't know if everyone's visualizing this the same way as me, but that's kind of how I'm imagining it. Let's see, do I have notes about anything else? Anybody got any questions they want answered about state repression? What it looks like? What kind of stuff we've seen here? One example I think is really important, especially for this encampment, especially for folks who've been staying overnight, is that police want to use your nervous system against you. Almost every night, again, except for, like I said, last night sounded like it was pretty quiet. Almost every night, some random crazy bullshit has happened, right around midnight or 2 a.m., to wake everybody up and make them scared. And we, as a community, all of us together, marshals and everybody else alike, have worked together very well to keep people safe from those altercations. So give yourselves a hand for that real quick. And it fucked up everybody's sleep and made everybody scared. And that's correct. That's the appropriate reaction to that stimulus. And so one of the ways we have to keep each other safe is figuring out how to come down from those panics, right? When the police stage a bunch of riot cops and then just go home, that's also state repression, right? We're very happy when they don't show up and step on our necks, but they've still scared us, they've still wasted our resources, they've still activated our nervous systems. So it's very important that we do things, whatever it is for you, to try to reach a baseline again. If you find yourself feeling really frantic and jumping at every backfiring car and feeling like you need to run through camp and say, there's one cop over there, maybe take a breather. Maybe go into your tent, maybe take a walk, maybe even go home for a couple hours. Whatever you need to do to be able to sustain the kind of vigilance that we need and not trend into that sort of panicky state that they want us in. Yeah?
Yeah.
How calm are people feeling today?
Calm. Don't panic.
That's right, don't panic. Absolutely. Walk, don't run, right? But when you chant it, you only say walk, because if you say don't run, then you've said run, and people will hear that. We don't want that. Let's see, what's some other examples? I also don't, like, DSA folks, like, how much time am I at? I feel like I'm at a comedy open mic or something. I'm just going to keep talking. Yeah, self-care is anti-repression. We just talked about that. One really good rule of thumb is when you hear hoof beats, think horses, not zebras, right? So one example, there's been this really annoying ringing periodically throughout the entire campus. It comes from some building. It's probably some like malfunctioning tornado alarm or something. And maybe the cops are doing that on purpose so we can't sleep. But what are you going to do about it? Might as well consider that it's an accident and we're just going to put up with it and buy some earplugs, right? Because if we start thinking like, oh, the cops are trying to get into our brains through transmitted signals from some building, we become less useful because we get really jittery. If we start identifying zebras, it can be dangerous. And then, sometimes, there's zebras. So if you see stripes, make sure to react appropriately. I'm hoping that analogy is making sense. I'm really doing a lot of mumbling. Let's see. Oh, here's an example we've seen both in 2020 and in 2024 that is so similar, it's as though they think we have actual amnesia or everybody was literally born in the intervening 4 years. So who was around in 2020 for some of the state repression then? Right on. Give yourselves the hands for still being here. Very glad you're still here. So if you remember in 2020, after George Floyd and Breonna Taylor were killed, there was a lot of very intense, very, let's say, organic and horizontal action. Yeah? For about 5 to 7 days. And then suddenly, that second weekend, there were these really, really boring speeches and these really long marches with no purpose whatsoever. They would take us from the Capitol all the way to Cheeseman Park to sit on the ground for a couple hours and then go home, right? That was on purpose. That was a specific group called We Are Love Denver. Yeah, you remember them? They were run by a dude who was like best friends with the mayor and also was in the military and had a really conspicuous resume gap where he seemed to be in South America probably doing some kind of regime change or something. It's pretty transparent, but when you're in the crowd, it's not that hard to fall into it. Because, you know, who's not for peace and love, right? Are we here for peace and love today?
Yeah.
But only sort of, right? What we're here for is Palestine. Keep it specific. We Are Love Denver wanted to convince us that we could negotiate with the police and get them to do a little bit less police brutality, and then maybe that would be the right amount of police brutality. When in fact, the right amount is fucking zero. So we have to be wary when people show up with that kind of bullshit peacenik messaging, right? When people come up and say, isn't this really just about love? No, nobody's against love. If it was just about love, we wouldn't have to be here.
That's right.
We're here for Palestine, and Palestine is being assaulted every single day and needs our support. And it doesn't need a bunch of people, a bunch of fucking hippies, right? What it needs is disciplined militant organizers like you all. So what's amazing is that on about day 5, 6, or 7 of this encampment, a bunch of people showed up in t-shirts that were very obviously printed for very little money about 20 minutes prior to being put on, and they said, I am love. They conjugated it, but it was the same exact message. And there were a couple of really nice old ladies, and they were trying to hand those shirts out to people, and all of that is movement suppression. It is no coincidence that at the same time as those individuals were here trying to hand out this sort of, let's say, diluted message, there were also some people who wouldn't identify themselves, who were almost certainly affiliated with admin, handing out these nice brochures that had this really innocent-looking FAQ. It was 10 tips to having a peaceful protest. And who doesn't want that, right? Those 10 tips, in my opinion, were 10 ways to get in a fight with your comrades. And we don't want that. And what was really fucking cool here is where We Are Love Denver had like at least 3 days where people were actually paying attention to them, and it took kind of a long time to get over it. Every person I talked to who took one of those flyers was just like, oh, this is garbage, I'm gonna put it away. Y'all are disciplined. Y'all fucking get it. So we have a very specific kind of state repression that we need to subvert today. We have been disrupting business as usual, which is exactly what we've been asked to by the people on the ground in Gaza, right? And business as usual this weekend is some graduation ceremonies. And we've got a couple different angles of state repression going on. Yesterday, a group of around 25 very brave and noble comrades stood at the front, right next to the stage, where the ghoul who has been failing to negotiate with us from MSU, Janine Davidson, that's her name, I remembered it. Yay! She gave her speech, and everybody stood and screamed "Free Palestine" at the top of our lungs. We were joined by many of the graduating students, and it was extremely disruptive to the proceedings. Their strategy that day was to wait us out, which can be really suppressive, right? We're kind of feeling that in the camp. Like, are they ever coming back? Are we fighting them? What's happening? And then they went to the press and told the press that there was no disruption. Multiple newspapers have reported this morning that the MSU graduation went undisrupted. Just lies. Just pure lies. Basically, it's the same sort of propaganda we see from Israel. Just say things that aren't false and hope that the truth doesn't catch up, right? Today, there was an even more successful disruption that they did actually have to disperse. And so now the way that the state is repressing us is that none of those people from this morning's graduation are allowed back in the building for this afternoon's graduation, despite it being open to the public. So what does that mean we have to do? If you weren't there this morning, I've got news for you. We're going to the Denver Coliseum at about 1:30 for the 2:30 proceedings. Are y'all with me? Taking a lift and parking, pretty much the same amount of money. That I will offer as sort of random counsel. If you are interested in disrupting those proceedings, either head there yourself or come find one of the organizers with SDS, and we'll help get you figured out, okay? Are y'all with me? Are we going to fuck up this graduation? No business as usual! No business as usual! No business as usual! No business as usual! And while we're there, we're going to not talk to the cops, we're going to have the legal line on our arms, and we're going to trust our police liaisons. Is that right? Yeah. Who keeps us safe?
We keep us safe.
Who keeps us safe?
We keep us safe.
Who keeps us safe?
We keep us safe.
Thank y'all very much.
Where?